Hello and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. We are super pumped for today's episode. Very special guest, Michael Chernow.
Yep.
Michael's here through a mutual friend of ours, Brett Ender. Brett makes a lot of great connections, so shout out to Brett for connecting us. And man, thank you for making the time to come on today during your trip here to Austin.
Brother, I'm super excited to be here, and Brett is such a good dude. He's always like looking to make to enhance just people's lives, right? Like ever since I've met him, he just sends me like in really interesting moments in my life. Like I'll just get a random text from Brett about God or about, how can I be of service? And so when he was like, hey, you got to meet my buddy Trip, I'm like, let's go. Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially talking about, recovery and stuff like that.
For sure, man. Yeah, I think the first time he connected us, it's been, I want to say it was back in the spring, maybe. And you were coming in and out, you were traveling a lot, and we couldn't land it because of so many moving parts. I was traveling.
Yeah.
And, but I started kind of following your content at that point, religiously, just like seeing what you had going on, what you were about, what you were talking about. And I was like, man, this guy's a perfect fit for this conversation. So just to give the audience a little bit of awareness and background, first and foremost, Michael is founder of Kreature of Habits. There's some restaurant stuff we'll get into, but he's an entrepreneur, and his entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is driven from a very similar place as mine. I'm excited to get into that and see if that holds true. And he's also been in recovery now for how long?
20 years.
20 years. So pretty good fit for the show, man, and really represents what Ain't Dead Yet's about. It means two different things to me, but at the end of the day, if we're still here, we got a shot. And you can build a lot of beautiful things in life if you just keep going. And so I'm excited to dive into all of that, man. And to start it off, just so everyone kind of has a little bit of grasp on you and your upbringing and your childhood, let's take it back to the beginning. Where does it start? When does it start?
Yeah. No, first of all, I love the name of the podcast, Ain't Dead Yet. I kind of, when I heard you say that, my first thought was nowhere near. I'm nowhere near that. I honestly feel like I'm going like, I'm going in reverse. Like that's kind of how I feel. I'm 44, and I feel like when I say that out loud, I still kind of feel like a 25-year-old hearing 44 and being like, it's old, man. But I literally do. I feel like, I'm in my 20s. I think life has been, I'm blessed. Every day, no matter if it's raining, snowing, dark or beautiful blue skies, like I just know I'm blessed, And so, I grew up in New York City, in Manhattan, the kind of center of it all. I was born in 1980. So, I have memories of the 80s, but I really grew up in the 90s. And growing up in New York City is a very, very intense. You're exposed to a lot of things at a young age, good and bad. I believe I got my grit from growing up in New York. I believe I developed my emotional intelligence from growing up in New York, having to navigate, because I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the room ever, right? Like and I'm cool with that. But I've been able to just sort of maneuver and navigate and understand how to acclimate to environments from being exposed to so many different people as a kid and growing up in New York City. But I also was exposed to a lot of the bad news, and at home, my father was a tradesman. He was an electrician, and my mom was a secretary. My dad was very sick, physically sick with diabetes, is type 1 diabetic, but he was mentally ill. My dad was an undiagnosed because he refused to go to the doctor, but he was most likely bipolar, paranoid schizophrenic, I think, towards the end. My aunt, unfortunately, his sister, later in life, she had a mental break and ended up being diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. So she's suffering really hard right now, which is sad as hell because she's the most wonderful aunt anybody could have ever asked for. But now she's, you know, kind of a shell of a human. I miss her and love her. Even though she's alive, it's tough. So mental illness runs through my family. And my dad was very, very ill. So what that did was create an enormous amount of tension at home from as early as I can remember. You know, one of my earliest memories is we lived in this little small apartment, my mother, my sister, my father, and I, and my sister and I shared a bedroom. There was a living room, and then there was this little dining room alcove, like a little dining room cutout that my parents used as their bedroom. So they had like a Murphy bed, like an old school Murphy bed, and they would pull the Murphy bed down in the evening, and that was where they slept, but it took up the whole room. And the only way to get into the kitchen was through the dining room. So if I wanted to get into the kitchen as a young kid, and this is funny because I believe I do believe I was born with this sort of predisposition genetically to addiction, because I was addicted to apple juice and orange juice as a young kid, fully addicted, like could not get enough of it. And so I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would probably from, you know, 4, 5, 6 years old, and I would walk into the living room. I would go underneath the Murphy bed, crawl underneath the Murphy bed, go into the kitchen quietly, and just suck as much orange juice or apple juice as I could out of the containers. And one night I remember going in there, and the doors, there was like kind of like saloon doors on the kitchen. It wasn't like a door, it was like saloon doors. And I like could see through the saloon doors, and my father had my mother up against the kitchen counter with a big knife on her neck, and it was obviously traumatic. And I was like, "What the fuck?" You know, I mean, at that age, I just didn't know, you know. But that memory is so vivid and clear for me. I remember exactly the knife. It was a bread knife. It was a brown handle knife with like a serrated blade, and yeah, you know, like, so my dad was very, very violent, and, you know, and very emotionally abusive. And, you know, he would come into our bedroom as kids, and my sister and I shared a bedroom. So it was kind of tight quarters, my sister and I, you know, and we had beds that like, there was like a pull out bed underneath the bed. So like, I slept up here. My sister would pull out her mattress and sleep right next to me. And he would threaten us at night if we weren't go to bed immediately. And then if we didn't, you know, shape up, he'd come in and he'd just, you know, he'd use a belt to put us to bed. So there was just a lot of trauma, dude. You know, there's a lot of trauma with my dad. And ultimately, as I got older, the abuse really sort of fell on my mom and myself. My sister was kind of spared. But once I was like 10, I just kind of committed to not allowing him to do that to me anymore. And so I began fighting back. And he didn't like that, you know? And so because I began standing up for myself in the house, he turned up the volume on the aggression towards me, you know? And it got bad. You know, I started to rebel. 11 years old, I started smoking cigarettes. 12 years old, I tried weed for the first time, and that was kind of it. Like, I was like, this is it. Like, I'm in. I got it. Like, now I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stay high, you know? And but the violence really continued to happen. I was already, you know, sort of in the social worker's office pretty regularly at school because they just knew that something was up. Anyway, one day we had gotten into a pretty bad fist fight, my dad and I, and I knew that I wanted to like show him how painful this was for me. I didn't want to kill myself, but I just knew that I had to do something drastic to kind of show him. And I also was hoping, I think, that if I did something drastic, he would just break and give me a hug and tell me he loved me, you know? And so we got into this big fight. I called him into the room, into my bedroom, and right in front of him, I just sliced both of my wrists. And, you know, what I was hoping for certainly did not happen. He kicked the shit out of me. And the next day, I mean, I obviously didn't go deep enough, right, to die. But the next day when I went to school, social worker checked in with me, saw that I had bandages on my wrist, asked me what happened. I told her the story. And she, mandated that I go to Pain-Whitney Mental Institution to get evaluated for suicidal tendencies. And that's when the child services kind of got involved in the house. And that's when my sort of addiction really took shape. And over the next few years, by the time I was in ninth grade when I was 13 years old. I'm young for my grade because of my late birthday. And I got into freshman year of high school. At first I was like kind of like, trying to figure out my way. But I hooked up with this kid who took me to like a rave. And I think I did acid actually at that rave. And I just figured out that like I could live this way and be okay no matter what was going on at home. It saved me. It actually worked. The drugs worked for a while, and then I began selling drugs at school. By the end of my freshman year, I was kind of like the go-to guy. I was not sleeping at home. I was, sleeping wherever I could, friends' houses, out all night, just on the street, And then finally, in my sophomore year, towards the end of my sophomore year of high school, I was barely home anyway, but we got into a big fight at home. My father and I. My neighbors called the police again for like God knows how many times. And when the cops came, the child services were notified and they came as well. And they basically said to my mother in that time, if you don't get this kid out of here or get him out of here, my father, we're going to take him to foster care. And I heard that, and they had found, my mother had found all sorts of drugs in my room, like all sorts of shit. And so the cops were like ready to lock me up. Child services were ready to put me in foster care. And I looked at my mom and I said, look, she was also afraid for her life because my father had threatened her life a number of times. She was diagnosed with abused wife syndrome. My mom, loved me to death, and I love my mom. There's definitely tension between my mother and I for a number of reasons, but she always loved me and I felt her love. So there was love at home from my mom, for sure. And she always wanted to support me and always wanted to help me with my addiction. But I was completely out of control. And so I kind of looked at her and I was like, look, I'll deal with this. Like, they're just going to have to catch me because you know that I'm not going to foster care. You don't want me to go to foster care. And I know you're not leaving him because she was caught in this, pretty fucked up web from my father. That was like, my father was like unbelievably manipulative.
Yeah.
And scary as hell.
Yeah.
Scary dude, know. And so that was it, man. I left. I moved out of my parents' house and I was off to the races, and I was doing all sorts of drugs, every drug under the sun. But it worked for me in those years, in those early years, And then when I was 18, it just kind of got a lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. It's interesting to hear the multiple transition points in people's stories, like how it starts, what it's originally like, and then there's in every story there's this point where it's like, oh shit, it's not that anymore. Very similar story for me. It seemed completely fine until it just one day it wasn't anymore.
Yeah.
It was never okay, right? And we're looking back on it, like full transparency. When I look back, it was like none of this was ever good. But there was certainly a moment where it went from like never good to really bad. So it's interesting to hear that kind of occurred for you right around 18. What age did you say you left?
I left at 15. I left, like actually never went back at 15.
Man, so that's insane to me. 15 years old. I think back to when I was 15, and I'm not, especially in a big city like that, right? Like, I'm from a small town. I don't even know if I could have made it 15. To make it in the big cities has got to be insane. Were you just bouncing around, kind of staying?
Yeah.
Places?
So I interestingly, I got a job in a restaurant when I was 12,
Okay.
right? And so I was delivering food for the restaurant, and then they let me into the kitchen to cook in the back and do dishes. And that was kind of an escape room for me. It was like an escape route being in the restaurant. So I was always sleeping over at friends' houses. One piece of the puzzle that I left out that I feel like, I'm not, I don't have any shame anymore about, but I did for a long time when I was probably 4th grade, 5th grade, probably like 9, 10 years old. I gravitated to any man
Mhm.
that would treat me like a son. Any fatherly type figure that was not my father, I desperately wanted a dad to love me. Desperately, desperately. I think every boy does, and I just didn't have it. I wasn't going to get it, and I knew that. And so I gravitated towards coaches because I was kind of like a natural athlete as a kid. I really excelled in sports as a kid, specifically hockey. And my coach was a pedophile, and I loved this dude. I loved him. He was like, you wouldn't know he was a pedophile. I didn't know I didn't know what was happening to me was molestation, but sure enough, it was. And, once I kind of realized that in my teens, that had happened to me and a couple of other friends of mine, the amount of shame I had from that, like, oh my gosh, like, wait, am I gay? Did I want that? I loved him. Like, I loved hanging out with him. And all these emotions and fear and thoughts and confusion and all this shit hit me, like in my mid-teens, 15, 16 years old. And all I wanted to do was murder him. I wanted to kill my father, and I wanted to kill this guy. And there was resentment towards my mother too about that, because I was like, they just let me sleep at this guy's house.
Yeah.
As a kid, I've got 2 sons, dude. I mean, I would just if my son was like, hey, Dad, can I sleep at my coach's house? I'd be like, no. But the beauty of that for me is that my son would never ask to sleep at his coach's house because he gets so much love at home. So much, dude. I coach every fucking sport I can. I hang out with those boys so much. I mean, we'll get into that, but anyway, so yeah, when I was 15, I was working in the nightlife. I was working in restaurants, and I always hung out with older kids. So I was like hooking up with this freshman at NYU at the college, and she had a dorm on 9th Street and 3rd Avenue that I would just always crash at. And so she was like, "Move in here," and I was like, "Done." So I just like moved into her dorm, and and so, I mean, that's where that was like my first move. That was like a safe place, but it got, I always ended up in pretty damn good situations. I always landed on my feet when it came to like where I would rest my head. I never had to worry about sleeping in the street. I always like figured it out. And I think one thing that I would say is that a memory that I have, very clear, vivid memory, is in 1st grade, I had a very good friend named Ross Delafield, and his family was from Kentucky, and they moved to New York. I think his dad had a job that moved him up to New York, and so they were just like a real traditional, like good old boy kind of family. And Ross was awesome, and he invited me to like have a play date at his house one day, and I remember clearly having dinner with his family around a table. My family never once in my life sat around a table and had dinner. Just did not happen. So when he invited me over for a play date, and then everybody sat down at the dinner table together, he, his brother, his mom, his dad, and me, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like they're having dinner together, like they're talking to each other. And so I remember saying in that moment, I have to figure out a way to get Ross's parents to like me so that I can sleep over here. And that was like the beginning of my kind of, I don't want to say like manipulations techniques, but it was really the beginning of my like emotional intelligence development, where I was like, all right, I'm going to make sure they like me so that when I ask Ross If I could sleep over at his house and he asks his parents, they'll say yes.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So 15 to, you know, really 15 to 18, I just bounced around, you know?
You said something in there I wanted to ask you about because it kind of triggered something within me. There's a lot, but there's one thing in particular, the athletics piece, playing sports. For me, I've realized as I've been in therapy, done all this different type of work and reflection, my first form of therapy was actually athletics. It's between the whistles, it was like I could escape. And I was always the kid that was like, man, like that kid's aggressive. Like he goes hard. He plays through the whistle. And it was because I never wanted the whistle. You know what I mean? I didn't want to lose my escape. And as a kid, a lot of times that's celebrated. You know, they're like, man, it's an effort kid. He's going to go a long way in life. But what's not recognized is what's making that, what's creating. Why is this 8, 9, 10-year-old filled with rage and wants to hurt other kids? Like there's probably something there to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And so did sports represent that for you at all as far as an outlet or an escape?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I was addicted.
Yeah.
Every opportunity I got to play sports, I did.
Yeah.
You know, and my parents, I was like a latchkey kid, you know, like there was no real rules, you know. I mean, I started a dog walking business when I was in 5th grade. And, you know, I would get home from school, and if I wasn't going to play hockey at Carschultz Park, I was walking dogs till 8 o'clock at night. You know, my parents just didn't have like, it wasn't like a, hey, you got to be home type thing. My father was completely lost in the sauce, had zero to do. He would lock himself in this little corner in our apartment and not talk to anybody unless he was screaming and yelling. And my mom worked until 7:30 at night. So I was just kind of like this, you know, doing whatever I did. And so sport was really, yes, like my first real sort of escape.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, I think that you hear a lot of that in these stories of addiction recovery.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of athletes. And it's funny, it's not funny, but it's ironic how people get back to that later in life once they kind of start to sort through things.
Oh, yeah.
They work back into this athletic.
Saved my life, dude.
Me too.
Saved my life.
And
continues to.
Without question. That's how I feel. And that's we'll get into that, but that's 100% how I still deal with a lot of the things that come up.
Me too.
I face it in that arena. And it doesn't mean it's always easy or fun, but it's a place where I know I can go and I will at least make progress. And sometimes like minimal progress is enough to keep me going. And I think that's why I lean on it so heavily, because it will provide that if you into it. So.
Yep.
But back to your story. So bounced around 15 to 18. At 18 years old, like that's where my story changed significantly. It sounds like from what you shared a little bit ago, that's where kind of the whether it was drinking or using, you said your drug of choice was anything.
Yeah, I mean, you know, from like 13 to 17, it was really kind of, I was going to a lot of raves, and I was selling a lot of drugs. So like the raves became for me about selling drugs, because I could go to a rave, you know, and I was always with these older kids, but I can go to a rave and make like $3,000, you know, on like a Friday night as like a young teenager, you know, because there would be thousands of people there, and I would just stand in a fucking corner for an hour and a half and just move through all the shit that I brought there, and then I'd party, you know? And so that was really kind of what drew me to the raves, because it was like that was the only place that you could kind of really do that, you know? Because they were typically in like, you know, unsanctioned like warehouses and shit. So, yeah, like there was a lot more like sort of party drugs. It was like, you know, ecstasy and Special K and crystal meth and stuff like that. So I wasn't like going for like one specific thing, although I did love ecstasy. I mean, I loved that drug. But when I turned 18 or 17, between 17 and 18, I was, you know, sort of end of my junior year of high school, senior year of high school. It was alcohol and cocaine. And alcohol and cocaine for me was it was not about partying anymore. It was just a lifestyle that I led. You know, it was like I drank and I did coke, and eventually that coke turned into freebase because I would cook it, and eventually that freebase became crack. You know, because I was just like, all right, I'm not gonna waste time cooking this shit anymore. Like I might as well just go to the crack guy.
Right.
You know, and then once you know, and that was like where it got dark.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like 18 to 20. I mean, I got sober. Right before my 24th birthday, August 2nd, 2004. And, you know, that was kind of like in my early 20s. My father died when I was 20. And that was an amazing excuse for me to get just absolutely annihilated and just like, you know, not even coast through life, just barely, you know, it just was, you know, I was dragging through life, basically trudging through life. But that's kind of when pills came into the mix, like oxys and shit like that, like 21, 22. And I wasn't really a downer kind of guy, but once the coke, crack, whatever, you know, became such a problem for me, I needed to find a way to cool my jets and come down. 'Cause I would stay up for 2 or 3 days, you know? And so that's where the pills and the heroin came into my story. And once heroin got in there, it was a pretty fast spiral out. You know, I mean, I OD'd 2 weeks before I got sober, and yeah, you know, heroin really was I went hard on it.
Yeah,
you know, I went hard on it because like that's like the ultimate numbing drug.
right.
You know, that's the drug that if you really want to just completely check out, that's the one, you know.
Yeah, and I've heard it described that way by several people. It's like it's the ultimate pause. I've heard it described like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like when you're like massively overwhelmed or anxious, it doesn't matter what the feeling is. It gives you a massive pause from that feeling.
Yeah, like if your goal in life, and as an addict for me, my goal was to not feel. And that is the one drug where immediately, once it hits your system, everything is, you know, numb.
Yeah.
You just.
Yeah. No, I never tried heroin. I don't know how. There was a couple different times I remember it coming up in conversation at parties, and if it would have been there, I would have done.
Mm-hmm.
But I was an upper guy. That's just where I really loved drinking. I love the way there was like a point in drinking before I got to coke, like that 4 to 8 beer buzz where you're just like, you're on your game. You can talk about anything, everything's smooth. You feel this layer of confidence that you don't typically feel. You're not quite thinking about everything that's happening at home or wherever else. It's kind of a freedom feeling.
Mm.
And then the problem was I never held it at 8. I went to 20. And you lose that kind of ability to feel those great things, obviously, as you get deeper. Once coke came into the party, it was like, oh, I can maintain this 4 to 8 beer buzz for days.
Yeah.
I can live in that window. And I fell in love with it quick, man. And probably the most codependent relationship I've ever witnessed was my relationship with alcohol and cocaine specifically. Like it was almost scientific at times.
Yeah. It's the best. It's a marriage, you know?
Yeah. And I try to explain that like, because drinking's part of our society. Like it just is. And call it fortunate, unfortunate, however you want to look at it. I personally hate it. I think drinking is honestly the ultimate gateway drug. That's what I feel.
Well, I mean, I think it's so interesting that the two things, you ask any addict that's either in recovery or not, how'd it start?
Yeah.
And they're going to either say, the first thing I did was smoke weed, or I had a drink.
Right.
You know, and you know, what I will say about alcohol, I loved drinking, and I drank an ungodly amount. I loved drinking. I was working in restaurants, you know, like I was never not drinking. But you know, cocaine kind of gave me the opportunity to drink and stay straight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it was like, you know, like if I could drink and do coke without any consequences, you know, shit, man. Like it feels great when you're a little buzzed and on cocaine, you know, it just is. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. That's the truth.
Yep.
But it's a death trap. And you know, I think the thing about alcohol though, is that alcohol wreaks havoc on your body, dude.
Mm-hmm.
It is like, it's so crazy to me that it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
It's so, I mean, you know, there's only really two substances that you can die when you withdraw from, and it's alcohol and barbiturates.
Mm-hmm.
You could die if you are a bottom of the barrel alcoholic and you just stop and you just cold turkey stop it. The DTs can kill you.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? So that's why you got to go to detox, because you got to have some maintenance on that while you're getting off of alcohol if you're a deep-hearted alcoholic, you know? And that shit is legal. It's not only legal, but in many cultures and in many societies and many families, it's like a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
You drink. It's what you do.
I've gotten this question a few times, like why. So if anyone who's listening, if you've ever seen someone like in withdrawals from alcohol, suffering from, you know, what comes with that, it's pretty apparent, right? Like it's not, you don't really have to ask what's happening, right? It's like, if you've seen it, you know what it looks like. It's pretty obvious. And so people always ask like, well, why would you walk in the store and buy that guy a drink? I'm like, because if I don't, he might fucking die. Like that's the reality. Do I think it's the right thing to do? Like, I don't fucking know morally. Am I prolonging his abuse of alcohol? Sure. But am I also prolonging his life till maybe he can get to a detox? Sure. And so I think alcohol scares me more than anything, because again, I never, in high school or middle school, I never said like, man, I can't wait to do coke. That was never a conversation in my brain. It was like, but I want to have a beer because that looks cool, man. Looks like those guys, they work hard. They're big men. They've got women around them. They look happy. They've got boats, whatever the thing is. But like beer was there too. And it was like this, it was just part of the image. And I was like, man, I would like to have a beer. I would like to try that. I would like to experience that happiness, that joy. And, but I didn't know at the time as a kid when I was signing up for that beer, that it was going to lead to what it led to, you know, and that's what we talked about kids. I don't think that's educated enough, right? Like when I was coming through school, it was marijuana is the gateway drug. Marijuana is the gateway. Weed's horrible. And like, I understand, and I don't necessarily disagree completely that it's not a gateway drug, but I never smoked pot and wanted to do coke. Like,
yeah, my feelings on marijuana are like, hey, like if you could smoke weed every once in a while, fucking go for it. You know, like I have no judgment. Here's the hardest part about people like you and I. We, unfortunately, and I don't know how you feel about this, but when I first got into the 12 steps and they told me I had a disease, I was like, bullshit. This is like, it's either I want to do it, or I don't and don't, you know? However, I just had a double board certified neurologist and addiction specialist on my podcast, this guy, Dr. Russell Sorosky. And he spent his life for the last, well, not his whole life, but he spent the last 10 or 15 years solely focused on this topic. And it has now been proven that addiction is a disease of the brain. And our brain, my brain, your brain, fires dopamine at a much, much, much more powerful rate than someone who does not have addiction. And he said have addiction on my podcast. I'd never heard anybody say that. He's like, yeah, have addiction. I was like, have addiction? He's like, yeah, it's like having cancer. You know, it's like you have addiction. And so because our dopamine receptors, once the alcohol or the opioids sort of hit our opioid or dopamine receptors, I forgot which system. It's not the limbic system, I believe is what he said. We are just different in that system in our body. And so once we consume alcohol or opioids or anything that's going to fire off dopamine for us, to our brain, it's like a 10x plus compared to someone who doesn't have addiction, who doesn't have the genetic makeup. And of course, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that probably have what you and I have that have not gone down the path that we have. I think trauma experience definitely enhances and propels and is a catalyst for us to want to escape even more. But, it is actually a disease. And I was kind of happy to hear that, because it was like, because I just know how I am with everything in my life. Yep. I'm just not a gray guy. It's like black or white. My wife hates that about me. It's like I'm either doing this shit to the max, to death, or want nothing to do with it. It's not like, oh, I'm going to try and dabble. Yeah. It's like, if I want something, I'm going for it hard, and I'm going to be the last man standing. Yep. And it's like, I wish I would have had if I had my marbles at 18 years old, I would have loved to join the SEALs, because I would have definitely gotten in there. Yeah. Yeah. I did a simulation SEALs course 3 years ago, like a 75-hour thing.
Kokoro?
No, it was called the Modern Day Nights Project.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was intense. It was amazing. I loved it. And, it was led by SEALs, and they basically took me, they like named me the honor man. I was a savage. I was like the guy that was just like, I'm like, 35 guys signed up, 29 guys showed, and 9 guys finished. And this dude, Ray Kerr, came up to me at the end of it, and he was like, you would have been a great SEAL, And so, like, but I think it's just that mentality. You know what I mean? It's just like, if I want it, I'm coming for it, and I'll die. And it was the same thing with drugs, and alcohol for me.
Yeah, man, that strikes a lot of chords within me, because I pushed back heavily on the disease thing early on. I was like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now you're telling me I have this thing that makes me a weaker individual. Fuck. That was kind of my ego at play, I think, for the most part. But the day that shifted for me, and it was a personal experience, it wasn't like, I don't even know how I came to this conclusion, but it was like, oh shit, this might really be something deeper than just a choice. But I remember it vividly. I'd been sober for probably 8-9 months from drugs and alcohol. And I was in the program for the first 9 months. I did 3 meetings a day for 9 months straight, like Obsessive. It was during COVID, so it was easy to do that because it was all on Zoom.
Right.
I was on Zoom fucking all day, And so my arrogance was like, dude, I've done, whatever the number is, 810 meetings in 9 months. There's people that go to meetings every single day, or like once a week, for 15, 16 years that don't have the same exposure I have. I'm not going to keep doing this, because I was all in, right? So I stepped out of the meetings, and it was almost maybe a week or 2 after that, I realized, like, once I stepped back, everything that I was involved with was on an obsessive level. Everything. The person that I'd started dating, I was obsessed, right? So much so that, like, unhealthily, right? Like pushing them away because I was just like trying to always be in the relationship versus just letting it be a relationship. my fitness. So I lost 107 pounds in 12 months, 14 months when I got sober.
Wow.
Did an Ironman, like didn't do a half Ironman, didn't do a fucking warm up. Like I want to do the whole thing. Did an Ironman and like, so all these things started happening. I'm like, no, dude, this is in you.
Yeah.
This isn't a fucking choice. This shit is in you and it's just how you are. And I started to accept it at that point. And then it transitioned to this really good thing if I could learn how to use it in the right arenas, right? And that, I'm still working at that. I'm in therapy about that specifically right now, where it's like, you know, Kobe Bryant was an addict in my mind. Michael Jordan was an addict in my mind. Lance Armstrong was an addict in my mind. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way whatsoever. I think it's actually a massive part of what made them. They just chose to apply it to those things. And I think for me, learning what things to apply it to and what not to apply it to has been just this crazy journey. You know, for instance, in relationships, if you show up incorrectly in that manner, obsessive, right? It's not going to end well typically, right? You have to give space for things to happen and develop and feelings and all this other shit where it's like people like you and I make the decision, it's done. Like that's how my brain works.
I say it out loud, it's done.
Yeah, me too. And then it's over. Like, it's like, I'll die now. I'm ready. So much so that like, I've had conversations with God, and this might be dark for people, but like when something's not working out, not even in relationships, but life, business, whatever, I'll have a straight up conversation with God. I'm like, well, if you didn't want me all in on this, just go ahead and kill me. Like, I'm not going to do it myself anymore, but like, you know, go ahead.
Yeah. Send something.
Yeah. An asteroid, you know what I mean? Just blow me off the face of the earth. I'm good with it. And it's hard to explain that to someone who doesn't really understand the true meaning behind all in. Like when it's all in, it's every fiber. It's everything. It's the first thought in the morning. It's the last thought at night. It's all day long. It's like a beat down, honestly.
I remember when I opened up my first business and it took off. It's crazy. It's really fucking hard though, but it really took off. And my business partner and I were butting heads heavy, you know, but it was a super successful business. And I was working 18 hours a day. I don't recommend that to anybody, but you know, as an addict, you know, I was just fucking there. Right. And I'd get on my motorcycle after a long ass fucking day and it'd be 4:00 in the morning and the streets are empty and I'm going over the Williamsburg Bridge and I'm doing 110 miles an hour on my fucking Ducati. And the thoughts going through my mind on that bike are, I could just fucking turn my handlebars and just fall off the fucking bridge. Like this is so hard, you know, like it's so fucking hard. Like I could just, and like those aren't normal thoughts.
Right.
But like the thoughts that I would have in those moments would be to just like, I'm going to fucking do this until the death, right? Like I'm going to fight through this thing, you know? And, you know, as an alcoholic, it's someone in recovery, whatever, you know, when life gets really hard because you're doing really hard shit, because typically, you know, not all people that get into recovery are ambitious, but you know, if you hide in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you don't have to be ambitious because you're hiding in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but I'm saying that is a handful of a percentage of the crew. You know, that community becomes their obsession, right? And it saves lives all fucking day. And I think it's the only thing that really works, honestly, quite frankly. But there is a lot of sickness there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the problem is that when life gets really hard and you don't have an outlet like drinking or using drugs, our brain is sort of racing to find another escape route.
Yeah.
Because we love escapism. And the thought that comes to mind, unfortunately, for a lot of people in recovery when it gets really fucking hard is, I don't want to drink and I don't want to use, so maybe I should just fucking kill myself. you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, if I can't drink and I can't use, like, what's another way? You know, you find other things that you can wrap your head into. But when those things, specifically when you channel it in a positive way, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's fucking fitness, whatever it is, and you're challenged like in a really intense way, and you get scared and fear creeps in, the thought of like there's been many times, I mean, knock on wood, I haven't had these thoughts in a long time, but I remember times like going over the bridge on my bike, 110 miles an hour, 4 o'clock in the morning, nobody would know. Or get on a fucking plane, sitting on that plane, and maybe this thing would fucking crash. You know, like, you know, and that's real, man. I think it's hard to explain that to people that don't have this thing.
Yeah.
You know, but like when you don't have, it's a lot easier when you're not an addict, and like you come home from a long day's work, or you got a lot of stress going on, and you can open up a bottle of fucking bourbon and just, slowly sip on a bourbon and just cool your jets. Like that's the way most people sort of take a load off. We don't get that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we burnt that bridge.
Yeah, we don't get it. Yeah.
It's funny you bring up the suicide thing. So the night that I got sober, I made a deal with God in the mirror. And this deal, I think, has really kept me alive in multiple ways. But I just said, I won't die of drugs, alcohol, or suicide. Last 4 months of my run, I was suicidal. Like if I wasn't drinking or using, I wanted to kill myself. And so I just drank and used to not kill myself, which is a fucked up place to be. But I made that deal with God. I won't be drinking drugs or suicide. And I think that's kept me alive. It's definitely kept me sober at times. But at the end of the day, I would be lying to everyone if I said there aren't still times like where I'm like, you know what, man, fuck this. Like, this is bullshit. Like, what else do you want from me? Like that conversation. And I'll have it with God. And I'm like, do I feel shame around sharing that? Maybe a little bit, but that's the real shit. Like, that's really what happens. And so I want to share those things just like you just shared those things, because if people are listening and they're thinking they're more fucked up, like, hey, guess what? You're not. Like, it's pretty consistent actually in this community. Once people actually start talking about it, it's widespread. My most recent like real thought like that was I did a 100-miler December 7th, and completely broken off, like late middle in the night. It's fucking raining. It's cold. And I had some shit going on that whole week that was fucking me up, and carried that into the race, like thinking, oh, I'm going to work through it out there in the fucking woods, And there was a bridge. You mentioned bridge. There was a bridge on this course, and it was probably 80 to 100 feet off of like this river bottom. And I can tell you straight up, I was like, in my head, it's dark, it's the middle of the night, it's a trail race, there's no one fucking around really. Like, if I fell off this bridge, it's just, he was delusional. He was 84 miles into a 100-miler. He hadn't slept in 20 some hours. He's probably no one's going to think, oh, dude ended it, right? But that thought hit my head, and it was just like, fuck, man. And so it's still happening. Not near as much as it used to, but like it will still happen at times, and I have to be able to recenter in those moments, which is hard as fuck. No one talks about that.
I just want to say something, man, because I think it's so like, thanks for holding this space.
Yeah.
I feel, I'm super comfortable here. I feel like I could just, I there's like life is a fucking gift, right? And everybody's got a fucking story. And it's really nice to be able to hear other people's stories and feel identification and know that you're not alone. And that, I think, is why this podcast has probably grown, and why people like to, people that are either in or not in recovery. Like, it's not just addicts or alcoholics that struggle with these sort of mental ill issues, right? Like, mental illness is a real fucking thing. And it's specifically now, like in this country, it's a big issue, The end of the day, we're all just trying to fucking be happy, and what it really boils down to is, and I think, and I know this is going to sound kind of whatever, but I do believe it to be true. It's everything we do is in an effort to either love or be loved, period. Love is at the core of every fucking thing. It just is, man. You know, and I think for addicts, it weighs heavier on the wanting to be loved piece.
100%.
And, you know, like the desire to be loved is painful as hell, right? Like people hear the word love and they're like, smile, happy, joy, you know, fucking love.
Yes.
And the truth is that like when you feel like you're not loved, it's painful, dude. It's painful. And you'll do anything to sort of get people to acknowledge you because you think that's what love means. Right? I think that's what love means when somebody's like, attaboy, there you go. Fucking yeah, dude. Killer, you know, whatever.
Yes.
And you know, and so like the problem is with that is, and I know I'm not unique here, what I struggle with most, I think, and have probably my whole life, and I would assume it has something to do with my father and my childhood, is that even when people tell me they love me, you've done a great job, dude, this is awesome, look at this shit. And like, look, man, you know, I've done cool shit in my life in sobriety, like really cool shit that I'm fucking proud of. But I still don't believe them. I still don't believe them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what's kept me humble and grounded, honestly. And so I'm not upset or ashamed of not being able to accept people's compliments. But like last year, 2024, you know, I made a commitment to myself and I said, hey, Mike, this year, start saying thank you when people tell you nice things. Don't say, oh, come on, you know, you know, you're the, like when somebody says something nice to you that you've done something great, be like, thank you so much, you know, that's it.
Yeah.
Like you deserve it, dude. Start actually understanding that, like, you know, like life for me has been just challenge after challenge after challenge. And I do believe that I put those challenges in front of me, or God does. And the longer I'm here, the more I actually believe that, I know this is going to sound weird or crazy, but like I believe that this isn't my first time here. I believe that I'm like working on something in a weird way. Because if I'm not climbing, I'm fucking lost. I need to be climbing. I need to be looking up at a fucking summit. I need to be. And if I'm not, I force it there. You know, I promised myself this year not to have a physical challenge because I really just wanted to like focus on my business and my family. And I've been battling so hard, like, you know, because every year there's been something, some race, some competition, some way to challenge myself because I need that. And this year I was like the first year in God knows how long where I'm like, yo, dude, like you'll do a couple of high rocks races, but like you're not going to go and try to fucking, you know, do another bodybuilding competition. Because everybody around you hates it when you do that, you know, and you've done it for 5 years, you know, like just like I do believe that there's something inside me, probably you, probably a lot of people that we know in recovery where it's just like, and so, I mean, I'm trying to articulate this feeling that I have inside of me that really is, there's a fight in me that never lets me sit on the bench in between rounds.
Mhm.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't let me sit on the stool. It's like, you know, the fighter that you watch is a fighter, like ding ding, the bell's over, like that dude is pacing in his corner. He's not. They put the stool down, he's like, fuck the stool. I'm not on the stool. I'm ready to go. You know, like that. And I feel like that in my life, you know. I feel like I'm just like, ring the bell, man. Ring the fucking bell.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm grateful that I have that kind of fight in me. But sometimes I do wish that I was able to just take a breath, man.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
100%, deeply rooted in me. Everything you just said. And so I want to go back to the love thing and process through it like you just did. And see, like, create more alignment here, because it's actually insane. I've never heard it really described like that, but I've felt that way, right? I don't think I could even articulate it on my own until you just said it. And now I have like my own way to articulate it. So I'm grateful that you opened up about that. The love piece, man, it has to be rooted in childhood stuff. Again, I knew my mom loved me. Very similar. I know she loved me. She still loves me. Is there tension between us at times? Absolutely. There was tension yesterday on the phone between us. And it's because we were having a conversation around what's happening in my life right now and how that's directly attached to what happened in my childhood.
Mm.
And that's a hard fucking conversation to have with a parent. Especially when you don't want to hurt them, right? That's not your goal. You're just trying to explain. But either way, I always felt love from her. My dad, like, and people that have listened before, he left when I was 5. I don't know if he ever intentionally like didn't love me. I don't think that was ever his process in his head. I think he loved me the best he could, or how he knew to love me. So I have grace around that. Like, does that mean I don't get pissed off or angry about it at times? Like, for sure I do. But I have grace around it because I look at his childhood, right? And I suggest that to anyone that's like really pissed at a parent. Like, step one, man, like, go look at their childhood and try to understand, like, if that's connected at all. And if it is, like, it can be hard to see that, but it can also provide grace.
Mm.
And that's what I had to do. Once I did that, I was like, fuck, dude, I see it. But I chased his love for, you know, he left when I was 5 and he died when I was 33 or 32. So I chased it for 27 years. And I chased it by doing the things that I knew he liked doing, right? My dad liked to drink. He liked to laugh. He liked to chase women. He liked to put on a front almost that like he was this super successful individual. And even I knew at a young age behind closed doors, like, he was fucked up. You know what I mean? He wasn't what the public caught.
Mm.
But I pursued those things because I thought that would get him to love me and fill this void that I had. And because of that, for a large part of my life, I pursued love in the wrong places, right? I pursued love from people that didn't have the capacity to actually give love. And so I was always in this repetitive cycle. Like, I felt empty. I felt let down. I felt lonely. And drinking and drugs were part of what filled that void. It's just the truth. And people say, like, you know, do you regret your drinking and drug use? And I'll be the first to tell anyone, like, there were times where it was like the best shit ever. I was like, thank God I have this right now. Thank God. Because I feel okay. I just needed a break. I just needed a minute. I'm not saying it ended up like that, but like, there were certainly times where I looking back, I'm like, well, it might've kept me alive, honestly.
Mm.
That sounds crazy, but truth for me. And so once I got sober and started to pursue these other really fucking hard things, like starting a business or starting a podcast or doing an Ironman or losing 100 pounds, like, I realized really quickly, and it was actually at the Ironman. I crossed the finish line and, like, dude, I didn't feel a fucking nothing. I was like, fuck, that's it. That's what was going through my, and it took me forever to even admit that, because people the whole time are like, oh yeah, well, I wonder what's next for him. And I'd be like, it's not like that, man. This is just like a big monumental thing for me. It's bullshit. I crossed the finish line and was like, what the fuck am I? And what I did right after the Ironman was build the business and worked 16, 18 hours a day, pouring concrete, doing all kinds of crazy shit, like just nonstop. Dove into that with everything that I had. And that came to an end, and it wasn't even a week, dude. I was like, fuck, I need something that I can go all in on. And that happened to be ultra marathon, right? I was like, well, that eats up a lot of time. It's really hard. It's not fun. I'm just going to start fucking running. And I'm going to be the biggest son of a bitch out there on the course. Like, I'm going to lift weights like an animal, and I'm going to fucking run 100 miles. Like, it's what's going to happen. And it took me 3 years to finish my first 100 miler. 3 years. So I trained for 3 fucking years. Failed twice, right? Third time, got it done. Again, crossed the fucking finish line. This is a little over a month ago. Crossed the finish line. I was like, now what? Like, what's going to fill this cup now? It's not the business, right? It's not, what am I going to run, fucking Cocodona? You know what I mean? Go do a 250 miler? I don't know. And so I had to take a long pause, man, and really think about, is that how I want to live the rest of my life? Right? And there were times early in sobriety where I was like, fuck yeah, why not? Like, I can just build businesses and then I can be super fit. But what I'm finding is, like, there's a piece inside of me, and this is scary for me to even admit out loud now, that I don't know. I'm not sure it can be filled. And that scares the fuck out of me to admit. And I still feel it to this day. I felt it today. You know, there's this piece in me that's like, where the fuck is this piece at? I haven't found it in sobriety. I haven't found it in business. I haven't found it in therapy. I haven't found it in fitness. I haven't found it in faith, right? It's like, where is it? I don't understand. And I try to have that conversation on any level with someone who's not in it. And they're like, they'll say things and they mean so well, dude. They mean so well. And I love everyone in my life. Like, I have some awesome people in my life, but they'll say things like, just give it to God. And I'm like, bro, I hear you. Like, you don't think I'd tell God 20 times a day that same sentiment?
Mm.
Or like, you know, put it into your fitness, man. Just focus on your fitness. I'm like, dude, yesterday I worked out for 5 hours. 5 hours, dude, because I'm struggling mentally and emotionally right now. That's the only thing that gives me any relief. And this, I get relief in this because I can say the shit that's actually happening inside of me, where I don't feel judgment. It's hard for me to even be honest with a therapist, dude, especially one that hasn't been in the same boat, right? Because I automatically look at them like, you're not going to fucking get it, dude. You know, and that sounds horrible, but it's just fucking true. And so how that wraps up for me and into what you're saying is like, man, I don't know, for people like me or people like you, I really don't know if a day comes, I don't, where it's like, there it is. I don't know.
Well, I hear you. And what I'll say is, I don't believe that it will come from any one thing. I can tell you this, though. I have it.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of
hope.
Yeah. No, I have it, dude. I have it, and I can honestly just tell you where it is for me. And I know that I'm blessed beyond blessed in this arena. But at 5:55, Monday through Friday, I pull my truck into my driveway. I stop the truck halfway up the driveway, turn the fucker off, close my eyes, I put my hands on my knees, my lap like this, and I do this little breathwork thing. And that breathwork thing is a buffer that transitions me out of work maniac into dad husband mode. So I recalibrate in that 3-minute session, and then I pull the truck to my spot, walk into my house, and as soon as I get inside, I throw my phone into a drawer, shut that shit down. And then I walk over to the dining table, and my wife and my 2 kids are just sitting there waiting for me to fucking eat. That's it. Period. Done. That's it. That's it for me. That part of my life is it's just the love.
Man, thank you for sharing. I've felt for a very long time that's the recreation of proper family is that piece for me. Right. And fuck, man, I've tried my damnedest to be the best man I could be so I could find the right person to do that with. And because that's my biggest dream in life, is to be a dad and a husband, man. Like, hands down, I've been saying that for years. Like, that's my dream. That's what I want. I want to be able to take off this fucking armor and chains and all this shit and literally just be with my family and support them and try to help them not grow up the way that I did and try to give them the insight and like all these things and show them what love is supposed to be, right? In my eyes. And I'm not saying my form of love is perfect either, but I don't want them to ever experience the form of love that I felt. And man, it's deeply rooted in me, and I'm longing for it, if I'm being honest. And I think that it's weird that you say that though, man, because it's like that's the thing that keeps coming up for me is like that's what I want. And no amount of ultra marathons, Ironmans, weight loss, bench press, therapy, that shit, it doesn't necessarily translate directly to that, right? It's this other piece, and I've prayed about it, you know what I mean? Like, and I just, it scares me to think like, dude, again, if that's the piece that's missing, and I do believe that it's connected, like what the fuck do I got to do? You know, I had that thought running today, like out loud with God.
You know, I think, so I met my wife 8 months after I got sober. So I've been with this woman for 20 years in April, right? And I'm just here to tell you, all you got to do, and I know that like, think of it, you know, say what you want or my experience, all you got to do, unfortunately, you know, fucking hate to hear this, is just stay sober. Because you not sober is not good, right? I know for me, all I got to do is fucking stay sober. Like, I know that it sucks to hear and say even, right? But that's what I heard early days, right? And I don't really go to meetings anymore. I haven't really gone to meetings in years, you know, and I'll dip in every now and again. I was hardcore for the first 10 years. But like, without my sobriety, I got no shot with my wife. She's gone. Without my sobriety, I would have never met my soulmate. And I'm here to tell you, I've met my soulmate, you know. And I am going to add you to my prayer every day because I just know it's going to happen, right? It's just all you got to do is stay sober because that piece for us, we're tortured souls, man. Like, I didn't want to, like, when I said I don't think this is my first time here, like, I believe my soul has been here. And I'm like, I've kind of created this own little kind of philosophy in my life because my life has been so fucking hard, but I've been blessed with this family. You know, I've been blessed with this family. I don't question it or analyze it or try to intellectualize it. I've been blessed with this wife who I love more than anything on the planet. And I've got these 2 boys that I am so in love with, man. And I believe God is like sort of just giving me this opportunity to get a little taste of like this thing, but he's also like, you're not getting away with it easily.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got this Mount Everest all the time that you just gotta keep climbing. You gotta keep climbing. You keep climbing, this will be here.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta keep climbing because there's something that I'm supposed to be doing here. And I know that sounds like some fucking, you know, sci-fi spiritual, you know, fiction novel, but like I believe that, you know, the fact that I've been able to, like, if you looked at my childhood, you looked at my father's, and I'm so happy that you said, you know, look at your parents. You look at my father's childhood and his life with his father. Like, I'm not supposed to be a loving, caring father, husband. I'm just not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not, dude. If you looked at the relationship that I witnessed as a kid between my mother and father, and then the relationship that I had with my father, like, all arrows would point to abuse and, you know, neglect. And I'm here to tell you, man, like, that shit just does not exist in my family. There is zero negativity. Zero. You know? And that for me is the true gift that I was given from sobriety, because there'd be no chance that I'd have that. So I think, you know, when I'm sitting across from you, 2 men talking about real shit, not pulling any punches, like, just keep fucking gunning for it. And you're going to find, I promise, all you got to do is stay sober. It's not going to happen. I can tell you that for people like us, outside of sobriety, it just won't. And I say that to you, saying to myself,
right,
dude, you fucking fuck up one time, because I know how I am with everything else in my life. I'm obsessive about work. I'm obsessive about my family. I'm obsessive about fitness. I'm obsessive about my nutrition. All of it. I just go hard.
right.
I do it once. It will be like fucking taking a shit and flushing the toilet with everything that I've put together positive in my life. And so that does fill my cup, dude. You know, and I haven't made my wife or my kids my higher power. I've got a deep connection with God, like a deep one, and I don't know what it is. I don't question it. I try not to analyze it. I just know that I get on my fucking knees every single morning and I say a prayer that I've been saying for 15 years probably straight. Same prayer every morning. I made it up as I, you know, kind of went. And, you know, I have the same morning routine. And thank God, a day at a time, I stay sober.
Mm-hmm.
And that family relationship and dynamic gets better and stronger. And all the other things that happen in my life, you know, with business, I mean, I've failed. You know, it's been hard as hell. I mean, I've done well, I've failed. Like, we're supposed to experience all that shit, man. You know, like, we beat ourselves up so bad if we feel like we're not doing the right thing. We beat ourselves up so bad if we feel like we don't know something. We beat ourselves up so bad when we see somebody else that's better at something that we think we should be good at. Internalize it, beat ourselves up about it. And the truth of the matter is like, dude, life is fucking hard. And if you don't, you know, everybody said, you know, obviously negative self-talk is not awesome. And I've got it. Sometimes the volume is way up, sometimes the volume is way down. When negative self-talk shows up, I have a couple of tools that I use to sort of quiet it down, but I also know that if negative self-talk shows up, it's because I'm doing something really hard.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm challenged and I'm scared and there's fear and I like it. I fucking like it. The negative self-talk sucks. The challenge, the fear, the pushing through adversity, the courage, the warrior shit, the gladiator shit. Sobriety is about fucking warriors. It just is. You know, like you are going against the grain. 9 out of 10 people are allowed to have a drink every night. Smoke weed every once in a while. Shit, maybe even take some fucking MDMA with their friends. You, me? No, sir. No artificial flavors, man. And if we do, we run the risk of just throwing it all away. And so, you know, people that are doing challenging things, hard things, are going to have the volume turned up on a lot of these, on a lot of the, when the ego really gets into the mix, you know, like my ego is like, dude, you don't need to do that. You've already fucking done shit. You don't go challenge yourself by trying to build a business. What's wrong with you, man? Just fucking get a job that's coast, you know. It's all good, you know. Don't fucking, why would you sign up for that race? I don't need to do that. Don't be an idiot. You know? Like, that's the ego, dude. Just like here, just like trying to drag me down, you know? The body, the mind is like, protect you at all costs. Stay safe. I don't want you to die, so I'm going to talk you out of this thing. You know? I'm going to talk you out of doing the shit that you really want to do.
Fuck.
To keep you safe, to keep you from dying. And I just know it's bullshit. And those voices come up, and I'm like, I close my eyes and I'll say, all right, man, you know, sometimes I'll even negative self-talk out loud to myself, catch myself. Fucking, I remember 2 weeks ago, I was like, you know, I was going through some shit at work, feeling really fucked up. A lot of, you know, all sorts of shit was going on at Creatures of Habit. And I was like, in my head, negative self-talk, dude, fucking. And then all of a sudden I was like, Mike, shut it down, dude. If that was a person, you'd punch him in the mouth. Like, don't, shut it down. And then a minute later, I'm in my closet and I'm like, you fucking suck, man. Like, fuck, dude, you just said that out loud to yourself. You know? It's like, and then I'm sitting in my cold plunge and I'm like saying to myself, that's when that little switch went off and said, man, the negative self-talk is a sign that you're doing hard shit. And it's okay. It's actually a sign of success. And I know that sounds weird.
No, that's probably the most impactful thing. I mean, you said a lot of awesome shit, but I needed that. I've been, the past week, like legit 7 days, have been all fucked up in my head. And it's been nothing but negative. And I've created stories and just shit that really beats me the fuck down. But what I'm hearing from you and what I'm taking from what you just said, if it's appropriate, what it represents to me is like, no, the reason that's showing up for me right now and the way that it's showing up for me is because that's exactly what the fuck I'm supposed to be working. That thing that I'm creating every story and scenario in my head to run from it or catastrophize it or make it different or worse. It is actually it's my race.
Yeah.
That's the race I'm supposed to be training for right now. And I have to lean into it.
Hard.
You know,
run as fast as you can to it.
Yeah. And just be like, okay, I'm here.
Run as fast as you can.
You want me to feel this shit? I'm here. You want to fucking beat me with it? Go ahead.
You know what's crazy too? You know, when you're in the shit and you really feel fucked up, right? And you might be thinking about, oh my God, I feel so fucked up. This fear is so intense. Like, a very interesting exercise is to actually stop, pause, and reflect on the actual situation. Not acknowledging the pain and the fear. Actually ask yourself, okay, what am I actually feeling? Like, what is happening inside of me right this moment? Like, let me not totally, you know, I like to say this, you know, fear is real in everybody's life.
Mm.
Real in everybody's life, no matter who you are, where you're from. Fear is present most of the time in everybody's life. You have two options. You can live in fear, basically in a fucking super tight box, makes you feel real claustrophobic and like you can't move. It's in it. Or you fucking live with fear. The motherfucker is right here sitting next to you. You put your arm around it and say, I see you, dude. I hear you. I see you. I am not going to allow you to own me.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have handcuffs on me. I'm with you. We can walk together. You can propel me. I can use you as fuel, but I am not going to allow you to own me. Not going to happen.
Mm.
And I will literally do that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You will not own me. Endurance is my middle motherfucking name. I will fight to the end. So try, but I'm going to use you as fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And like, because I just know the end of the day, endurance and resilience is what we get from this disease.
Mm-hmm.
It just is.
Right.
You strip away the drugs, you strip away the alcohol, you're still left with that fire, that insane ability to commit, that insane loyalty, that insane ferocious hunger to get what you want, which was drugs and alcohol for a long ass time.
Right.
You strip that away. Now you've got this fire that you've got to be able to spread somehow, some way, and do it. And so that's a gift, dude. It's an insane gift. It's a superpower,
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to see commitment? Go walk into Skid Row. Go walk into Kensington, Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
All those crazy looking motherfuckers that are all strung out on that fentanyl. You want to see commitment? Dude, those dudes and female, they are committed. Hard committed. They are literally bent over backwards, levitating committed to the drug.
Yeah.
You get the drug out of their system. You get the drug out of there. You put them with the right person, potentially, the community, whatever. That person still has that ability to commit.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's truth. That's deep truth. Because I think, man, so when you look back now at this point and you talk about like how impactful your family life has been, I feel like that's I don't want to use the improper term here, but like almost an anchor for you.
Yeah, grounding for sure.
Like you can go out to sea and go through the rough waters and be a pirate on the front of the boat, all that kind of stuff. But you come back to shore and your family is there and it's like, okay, let me be here. Let me be still. And I think that for me, that's kind of the life that I dream of, right? Because there isn't a life where I want it to be still all the time. I just don't think that's for me, like permanently still. Because I want to go explore the ocean, if you will, from like a analogy standpoint. I want to go out the rough waves and test my grit and make sure that, I'm still having the experiences I was designed to have, but I want that grounding effect too. And right now in my life, I haven't necessarily found that specifically. I've been seeking it, and maybe that's part of the issue. I probably seek it with a level of commitment that freaks people the fuck out. I mean, it's like, this guy's like super committed to figuring this shit out. That's too much. And I see that being a possibility. I wanted to ask you a question though, too. You brought up breath work, and this keeps coming across my plate, my mental, and I don't know anything about it. Do you have like a recommendation for an intro into that? Like what?
Yes. So breath work. So the breath work that I talked about, like in my truck before I go into the house,
Mm-hmm.
I started doing that a few years ago because I felt like the energy that I was bringing home was way too intense.
Okay.
And it just was too intense. It was too intense for my wife. It was too intense for my kids. And I noticed it once my son had asked me, like, he just wanted to talk to me, and I just walked into the house and I was still on my phone emailing, you know, and I shut him down, and it crushed me once I realized what I had done, because I looked down at my son and he was like, and I just shut him down, you know. So that's when I implemented that breathwork buffer to just recalibrate before I came home. But that's a different kind of breathwork than the breathwork that has changed so much in my life, which is this breathwork that I started doing about 1.5 years ago with this guy, Michael Chernow, who is a breathwork practitioner who I met at this event. And the breathwork that he like holds space for is called rebirthing breathwork. And it's basically a 30-minute long session. And I've done a lot of therapy in my life. I've done the 12 steps multiple times. I have, you know, gone deep on sport and, you know, really tried to unearth. There's nothing that even comes close to the relief and the reprieve I have found in breathwork. Like, I'm telling you, some of the things that have happened to me in breathwork, the first time I did breathwork with this guy, Michael, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, he had asked me if I had done breathwork before, and I was like, yeah, sure, you know, Wim Hof, whatever. And he's like, no. He's just like, buckle up, you know? So basically, first time I did breathwork with him, I was lying down on a mat, and it's very simple. It's hard as hell to do it. It's like it takes like an enormous amount of energy to do it. But basically, the breath is you lie down. He has music, and the technique is so into your belly, into your chest, out through your mouth for 30 minutes straight. Don't stop. That exact rhythm.
Yeah.
And in 5 minutes or so, your hands start to seize up. 10 minutes, your mouth seizes up, stuck. 15 minutes, I'm just telling this is the truth.
Yeah.
15 minutes, you feel completely numb throughout your torso. This is my experience with it. Not everybody has these intense experiences. Insane energy and pulsations through my arms, where my arms feel like they just start to rise up. And I had no idea that there was going to be this physical component to it, where my hands, I couldn't move, I couldn't open my hands. I thought I was having a heart attack. So once I kept doing it, because I was like, I don't know, but like once it got too intense, I like snapped up, because I literally thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
And he like ran over to me. He like rubbed my chest, and he was like, relax. It's just oxygen and energy. Just, you did not take any drugs. You're going to be fine. Just keep breathing. He's like, just please trust me. Keep breathing. And so I did. And then he walked over to me a minute later and he said, I want you to breathe deeper. And dude, I fell into this space that took me out of my body. And it felt like he came over and he said, I want you to breathe deeper. And he said, are you married? What's your family situation? He's like, I want you to put your family in the front of your mind, and I want you to start breathing into them. And all of a sudden, dude, I felt like, if I had to describe it, like something kind of came over me with a huge blanket, the most comfortable blanket you've ever seen in your life, and just threw it up and just like dropped it down on top of me. And I felt this like insane warmth, and it was love, dude. And I felt love. I really think it might have been for the first time, the love that I have for my family and the love that they have for me. And I just exploded, dude. Emotion like I've never felt, like ever. I couldn't control it. It was joy and happiness and love, but I was so emotional. And I'm not saying I don't cry, but it's not like I don't cry often, you know? I tend to cry when I talk about this, because of how intense it was for me. But I really did understand that I was like this love that I felt in that moment was the realest love I've ever felt. And I wanted it more, you know, I wanted to feel it more. And so I lied there on the floor after every, you know, there was other people there. Everybody got up and I finally got up, and the other people that were there that had a little bit more experience with me came over to me afterward and they were like, congratulations. And I was like, what do you mean? They were just like, you really did it. You really had that experience. And I was like, wow. And so I was on cloud nine, dude. I'm telling you, I walked around for the rest of that day and I was just like, oh my God, I felt love for the first time for real. And then, and so I connected with Mike and then he was like, well, we're going to do this again tomorrow. Come on back. And he was like, I can't guarantee that you're going to have that kind of experience again, but just come back. Came back the next day. Within 5 minutes, my body was on. And for the next 20 minutes of that thing, I immediately was like, had this emotional release, and it just, a voice showed up in my head and it just said, you've got everything you need. You've got everything you need. Over and over again. You've got everything you need. You've got everything you need. And it just made me feel safe, dude. It just made me feel like, man, all the hard shit, all the pain, all the failure, all the things that I, you know, like, it's all good. I got everything I need, right? No matter what it is, no matter where you're going, no matter what you're going through, you got what you need. It's just have faith in that. And then I started working with him on a every other week. We started working, and there are two standout sessions that changed my life. One was, we started breathing. I felt, you know, very fucking sad. Just deep, deep sadness. And I couldn't put a finger on it, but it was just deep, deep sadness. And I realized in that session that every decision that I have made throughout my life has been in an effort to get my father to tell me he loves me. Everything. Been chasing that. Everything. Drugs, alcohol, business, family. Asked my wife to marry me. All of it. I want my father to say, I love you, dude. There you go. Good, you know, attaboy. All of it. And he's dead. He died a long time ago. And the thought that I was never going to get that from him, because I never did, crushed me in that session. Crushed me, dude. My chest felt like it was caving in, man. I was like, all this shit, all these things that I've done, all this fucking everything, you know, I'm never going to get him to tell me. And dude, 5 minutes before this, we were done, like the last 5 minutes, I like slipped out of my body. This is my experience. And I kind of saw myself on the floor lying down from an angle underneath myself. Like I was like underground, kind of looking up at an angle of myself lying on the floor. And there was it wasn't in the room that I was in, like the vision of what I was seeing, but like I was on the floor and there was a door in the corner of the room, and in walked my father. And he was young. He was like in his probably 30s. And he looked healthy, and he didn't acknowledge me. So I'm like sitting there, I'm like, you know, bawling my fucking eyes out. I see my father walk into the room, and he opens the door and he kind of just is like looking around, and he like starts making his way over to me, but not looking at me, just like walking towards me. And then I slip back into my body and I'm lying on the ground, and he drops down on a knee, kneels over, comes very close to my face, puts his hand through my hair, and he says, he said that. And that was intense, dude. That was, I couldn't believe that. And that was like a game-changing experience in my life, where because I think my dad did love me. And I think my dad probably wanted to tell me he did. But not everybody's meant to tell people that they love them, you know? And he was one of those guys, hard, tough, mean, mentally ill human, and just didn't have it in him to do it for whatever reason. It's not my business. But he told me he loved me in that moment. And so when I came out of that session, I told Mike what happened. I said, man, I just had the craziest vision, man. I can't even believe that happened. And he was like, Mike, that wasn't a vision, man. Like, that shit happened. He said, I was watching your body, you know, in that experience. And he was like, I wish I would have recorded that, because what you went through was unlike anything I've ever seen.
Mm.
And so he was like, that happened for you, man. Now you can take a breath. And I was like, you know, and so yeah, breath work, man, it is very powerful. You know, a lot of people talk about plant medicine, and a lot of people in recovery go that route to try to dig deeper. You know, I don't pass judgment on it. I fear that for me, because I just feel like I'd be going down to Costa Rica every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But breath work does a very similar thing, man. You know, introduced me to my inner child. Never experienced an inner child stuff before. People talk about it often. You know, you try to kind of relate to, like, or you try to envision like what it would be like to try to understand how to heal that child or whatever it is. I've read books on it. In breathwork, I saw my inner child. I saw myself frozen solid in fear at 7 years old, and changed my life, because now what that did for me was Mike and I put a plan together on how I'm going to heal that child through spending alone one-on-one time with my sons, because that's what I wanted from my dad. He never did it. So now I get to do that. I get to take my sons hunting with me. This year, the last 2 years, I dressed 2 deers with my boys. Like, wonderful shit, you know. Like, I took, I pitched a tent on our property, and I was like, dudes, like, we could sleep inside or we could sleep outside. What do you guys want to do tonight? You know, there's a tent is always pitched. We can sleep inside or we can sleep outside. And, you know, we sleep outside, you know. I think that breathwork stuff is, for me, it has been the only way to unearth some of these traumas that I just, you know, I highly recommend it. And the guy that I would highly recommend is this guy, Michael Gazzo, in LA. Yeah. He does it virtually. I do it virtually with him. The first few times we were in person, it works just the same. He knows exactly what to do. He knows exactly how to get in there. The only thing that I would suggest doing, and it sounds like you are this kind of person, even though, you know, you, like me, you know, we do carry armor. We wear thick armor. Just take that shit off before you go into that session, just so that you are, like, totally available for whatever the fuck comes down the pipe, and no walls, you know. Like, I coach guys once a year. This is the first year I actually chose not to do it, but typically for the last 5 years, I've been coaching dudes, 10 guys. I do it from January to March. And I do it because I just love working with dudes, you know. And the last year, I had Mike come in with that group of guys and do a breathwork session with us. And I prepped the dudes. I'm like, hey guys, like, just understand, like, you're gonna feel this physical thing, and the chances of you seeing some stuff and having some real, like, potentially life-altering, life-changing visions or experiences are strong, because I have. And 50% of the guys said they didn't feel a thing. Nothing happened. And I asked them before they did it, you know, after we did it, I asked them, I was like, well, did you breathe the way we were supposed to? Well, you know, okay, did you believe that there was an opportunity for you to kind of see something in this? You got to just be open and willing to experience it, dude. It's just powerful shit.
So thank you for sharing that, all of that, because I think I know exactly like the next place I need to go.
Gotta go.
I think that, because dude, I've sat in so many therapy sessions and they're like, just tell me what that inner child is saying. I'm like, dude, I don't fucking no offense. I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't know. I'm trying, you know, I couldn't access it. And so if that's a way that works, I'm not going to go in there and be like, I don't know if this is work. I'm going to unfortunately probably crave it. I'm like, where's it at?
No,
You know
go.
what I mean?
I'm going to put you in touch with Mike and say exactly this. Mike, there's one thing I'm after here. I want to work on my inner child. I want to see him. I want to experience him. I want to, like I'm telling you, I when it showed up for me, I didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
I had no intention of that happening. All of a sudden, and we had a string of pretty difficult sessions for me where it was painful shit that was coming up, trauma, shit that I've been carrying around that I just didn't know was holding me back.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, and I'm not a Japanimation dude. I've never been into that. But I had this vision of this crazy, chaotic, like city scene in like Japan with like lights and fucking just like shit going on. And like it was kind of like that. And there was this little person at the bottom of it. And it was far away from me. But it was in this sort of animation kind of experience for whatever reason. And I got closer and closer and closer, and I was trying to see what that fucking person was. And it was me at 7 years old, like this. That face, my shoulders stuck to my ears, couldn't move. And I got closer to it, and I looked at it, and it just crushed me, dude. It made me, I was able to see how scared I was at that age about what was going on in my life. And there was nothing I can do to shake that kid's fear. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't touch him. There was nothing I could say. It was frozen solid like a statue. But I knew it was me. I saw my face. And when I came out of it, I was like, oh my God, man. I was so scared. And he's like, yeah, man, we got to loosen that kid up, dude. What are we going to do? Like, and I was like, I don't know. What do I do? You know? And he's like, well, you can do things that you think that kid would have wanted done for him at that age. And I was like, well, how the fuck do I do that? What am I going to go eat ice cream every day? You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to do? And that's when I said, man, you know, I've got these two kids that I can really sort of play out this life that I've wanted. You know, because before that, full transparency, you know, I'm lucky that we have such a cool family unit and we spend time together, and I have dinner at night every night when I'm home, 6 o'clock. We have dinner together every night. We sit around the table. We do rosebud, thorn, and seed. You know, we hang out every weekend together. I don't work on the weekends. But I was not spending one-on-one time with my kids. Ever. I wasn't like, all right, Donna, you stay home tonight. I'm going to take the boys. It just wasn't happening. And that's how I'm healing that kid. Because now that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm doing that. I take the kids bowling. You know, and I just need to just say, everybody who's listening, like, we've talked about so much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so much. We covered a lot. Like, all I can say is, without my sobriety, I have nothing. That's it.
Same.
I've got nothing. You know, like, I wish I was not an alcoholic and an addict at times. I'm grateful many times for it because I do have this fire that has given me all these insane experiences. You know, we haven't talked about like my business life and shit, but who gives a shit about that? Like, because I'm sober, I've been given so many opportunities to just attack life. And if you're struggling with addiction right now and you're listening to this, if you're in sobriety and you're struggling and you're listening to this, if you're not struggling and you're just fucking thriving, all we got to do is stay sober. And I promise more is going to fucking be what do they say? More will be
Revealed.
Yeah. More will be revealed, man. It's just like, there's times where I pinch myself and I'm like, is this my life? Like, am I really living this life? I'm not, I was not supposed to live this way. I'm supposed to be fucking, high somewhere in a corner. I am. Like, that's what I know how to do really well. And so, as addicts in recovery, alcoholic in recovery, we can do any motherfucking thing we put our mind to. We really can. And sometimes we need to check ourselves because we can sacrifice other people for that. But I'm here to say that, like, I've got a good balance of everything I want and need. And I can also honestly say today, and I don't feel this 100% of the time, but most of the time, I love myself. I love who I am. I love who I've become. I know I'm a great dad. I know I'm a great husband. I know that I might not be the smartest guy in business, but I continue to push hard. Like, what else do I need? Like, I could gun for more money. What is more money going to do? Right? Like, is it going to allow me to take more vacations and have a big fancy fucking house? Sure. Right? Like, do I really need that though? Is that the shit that, like, when you asked me, where is the fulfillment? It's not in the fucking gold Rolex that I bought when I wanted to floss. It's not in the fucking, it's in, like, coming home to my house and looking at my wife and kids and being like, everything's gravy. Just is. And that shit is nowhere near possible without my sobriety. It's just impossible. I'd be gone the first thing. My wife would be out quick,
Dude. Well, that was quite a rip. You know what I mean? Like, it's always interesting though, and I was talking to him out there about this, man. Like, some conversations I really don't want to walk away from because I'm like, fuck, there's more. You know what I mean? Like, there's some, like, there's questions or things that it seemed like it was kind of back and forth in the sense of, like, we were connecting on things I feel like I've been missing connection on, and that felt really good to me. Felt like it was like I was missing a lot of that. And so to be able to have those conversations with you, like, I'm sure it's going to help the audience. It helped the shit out of me. Like, you showed up with things that I needed to hear. It was almost like again, this freaks some people out, but like a spiritual thing, man. Like, I think messages are sent through people at specific times for specific reasons.
With you.
And, man, I'm just so grateful for you. And I'm grateful that you showed up today, because the things that I've been struggling with, it was almost like you directly addressed them. Like, not on purpose, right? It just, like, happens. And so, man, just thank you for coming on. And I just deeply appreciate your time.
Dude, I'm so grateful to be here. One thing that I think, and I'm not a woman or a female, so I can't speak to females, but, I think it's so important for men to connect like this, and I didn't think of this. This is probably one of the most unique podcasts I've ever been on, because I didn't think about this as a podcast. I'm walking away from this as two dudes that didn't know each other from Adam, that have just connected in a really deep way. And it wasn't you asking me questions or me asking you questions. It was just two guys really talking about life. It's life in a real fucking way. And that's powerful. I'm walking away from this so filled up, dude. Like, I just feel there's this, like, it's just, you know, like you said, I came here with a message. Like, you being able to create this space for me to talk about the things that I was talking about, and you responding in the way you did, dude, this is just a wonderful way to have a Saturday afternoon, man. You know, and I think the people listening most likely are going to also just like, you know, the energy that you brought just gave me an opportunity to speak.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I look forward to continuing to develop our friendship, man. To be honest, I feel like this connection, I definitely don't want to die. You know what I mean? It's been a couple hours.
Went by like that.
Yeah. So again, thank you, man, and look forward to continuing the connection. We will plug your businesses just because we didn't get into that, and that's okay, right?
Totally.
That's totally okay. But I do want to make sure that we celebrate those things because that's part of your story, that's part of your work and your passion. I think that they should be celebrated. So we'll do that. And outside of that, man, that's going to wrap for today's episode of the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.